morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're tuning in from across the country and around the world. This is the Life Midwest Podcast, a social sciences podcast that often segues from that into this, which is exactly, you're filling in the blanks today. Thanks for coming to the show, everybody. I have my special guest co-host with me today, Jimmy, who was on with us last week, kind of talking about life in the Midwest and sometimes parts of life that weren't in the Midwest. Jimmy, how you doing, man?
Oh, I am doing great. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, well, you didn't fuck up too bad the last time, so I figured I'd have you back again.
Well, I'm glad I didn't fuck up too bad.
So last week we kind of touched on something a little bit that we actually decided spur of the moment that we wanted to do a full episode on, and that is, kind of mental health, and that's something that we take seriously here at the show, and that's something that's it's a bit personal for Jimmy as well, and it was something that Jimmy was really passionate about. I think it's important to note that everyone's experience in this is going to be different. Not everyone's outcome is going to be the same, and that's okay. So just keep that in mind as you kind of listen through today's episode, where it's going to be a lot of conjecture, a lot of belief, and it's not necessarily fact, but and I more so say this for myself because I throw my opinions out there pretty loosely, but I'm also very passionate when it comes to this topic because I think there's a big stigma around it in the United States. And I know 97% of our listeners are from the United States. So when I say around the world, I'm shouting out 3% of the listener base. I understand that. But mental health is it's something that we are still struggling to bring to the mainstream here in the States, and hopefully having more conversations about it, whether right or wrong, it helps kind of spread that and bring that forward. So without any further ado, I do want to ask you, Jimmy, what made you want to have a more in-depth conversation about mental health?
Well, I just feel like you said, the stigma about it, from my own personal experience, even just like parents and grandparents don't, quite understand what's going on. So being able to actually get an in-depth conversation about it, I feel like might be beneficial to at least somebody out there.
Right. Because I think, and I totally agree with you, because I think it's hard when you have like the older generation who's like, back in my day, we didn't have people with ADHD. It's like, no, dumbass, you did.
Nobody knew what it was.
And nobody knew what it was. And and millions of people suffered going undiagnosed their entire lives, and they just had to deal with it, right, not knowing what it was or just assuming that everyone else was that way. So yeah, no, truer words could not be spoken.
Yeah, no, I just feel like, it's hard for, older generation to understand it. Cause like you said, they back in my day. So it's hard to, reiterate to them something that you don't even quite understand yourself.
Right. Cause it's not like it's a broken bone where you can just show it to somebody and you can see the bone sticking out of your forearm and you're like, oh shit, you need to go to the hospital.
That's really weird you say that, cause that's legit what I was just hearing from some doctors last week.
What was that conversation?
It was during one of my group sessions where they were like, this isn't, something that you can treat with like antibiotics, where I decide, okay, you have this illness and this antibiotic's going to work. You can't just treat it like that. It's something that you have to go in depth with, really figure out what the key problem is, and kind of, if you are willing to take medicine for it, figure out what med's going to work for you, because each person is unique in that sense of this medicine might work for you but not for somebody else.
Right, because a lot of these are, well, especially depression-based mental health issues can be very like a lot of chemical imbalance type of issues, and so different medications make up different chemical components. I'm in no way a science major, so I'm not going to sit here and start talking about that kind of crap. But just to your point, it's different for everybody, and everybody's going to have a different treatment. Different treatment plan or a different way of kind of, getting better. I want to start with before we get too far about the battling through and the getting through it, I want to talk about the people who maybe they don't realize that they have something internally going on inside of them. Do you have any thoughts for that?
Whew. Well, if somebody doesn't realize there's a problem, that's like oh, I broke my ankle, but it might just be twisted. So how do you know to actually go get the help that you need?
Right. It's hard. It's really hard. So what is, like, if you had to define it, right? I think sometimes we make a little bit of an assumption saying that we know, we're aware of all, like, we're all mental health experts, and we know what, bipolar is, and we know what, personality disorder and schizophrenia. We know all the, the psychotropic or psychotropic. I don't remember that word. We all
psychotropic.
Yeah, we know all these different types of psychosis and mental health disorders, but do we actually define them? Do we take the time to define them? So, like, what is depression?
Well, depression, according to the hospital I was just at, depression is a disorder that makes you sad, but it is a different sad than normal. Depression can make it hard for you to work, study, or even do everyday tasks.
So, I mean, is that so? Like, looking at that scenario there, and that like very basic understanding, a very very overall general statement of like what depression is. Does that tell me whether I may or may not be depressed or no?
Absolutely not. None of us are experts. I just really want to stress that. Like, I mean, even from just my own experience, I thought maybe I was just having some bad days at the start of all of this. And for some that may be how it starts, but none of us are experts. And I can't stress this enough. If you think you might even have the slightest chance of having something going on like that, reach out before it spirals down to something that you might not come back from.
I can't do anything more than agree with that, and just wholeheartily, full send that thought, because it's not gonna hurt to go talk to a professional and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. These are the thoughts that I'm having. These have been my emotions. This has been my mood lately. These are my sleeping habits, my eating habits, whatever questions they may have follow-up wise, they will help you determine and figure that out. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's no different than, I mean, you get a physical every so often, right?
Right.
What's the difference?
Yeah, just go talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, I like that little connection. You get a physical every now and then to make sure your body's healthy. Go talk to somebody occasionally. Make sure your mind's healthy.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think there's a lot of people who go and see a therapist, and maybe they're working through something, and they eventually get to a point where they've worked through that, but they still go and see that therapist maybe a couple times a year or once a year even. And that might sound a lot. That might sound like a lot to you, or to someone who doesn't normally necessarily go a whole lot, but it goes by like that. I promise you. And you get through it, and it just becomes like a check-in, like, hey, how have things been? And it's kind of like talking to a friend, except you can't bring a beer.
Yeah, right. Well, it's also too, like, it's that unbiased opinion from somebody who doesn't know the real you, somebody who's trained in, listening, where you can just go dump everything on them and they give you a little insight.
Yeah. I think sometimes we go to our friends because one of the big things about depression, I feel like, is that when we get into these funks, we sit here and we say, those people, those friends, they always say, you can reach out anytime. You can come over anytime. But we almost kind of predict, and I'm not saying this is right that we do this, but we almost kind of predict what they're going to say, and it's like, oh, they're just going to say that again, and then it's like, oh, that's just because they're my friend. Like, of course they're going to say something like that.
Right. Yeah. Oh, you always, I mean, any conversation you go in having with like family or friends, like, you're already kind of playing that conversation out in your head.
Yeah. And it's hard because I know when I personally tell people, like, hey, if you need something, like, you have my phone number, here's my phone, you can reach me any time of day. And I really wish there was a better way to sincerely say, hey, I actually mean it, and I'm not just saying that, because I think there are people who just say that. They just have that, like, that lip service of it.
Right. That's definitely hard to find people who, like, truly mean it.
Yeah. And I just wish there was a better way to convey that it's like, I'm somebody who actually means it when I say that. And I'm
Uh-oh. You there?
Yep. Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. My mom called. Yeah.
Okay.
Instead of me calling my mom's calling me.
I was just worried, man. Them technical difficulties last week.
I know. Yeah. And you were thinking, man, the same issues we'd have a week later because this is totally live. But no, I definitely agree with you. And I think that, that can be hard to battle through alone. And so I think if you're talking, to your point, if you're talking to someone with that implicit, non-biased kind of viewpoint, I think that's really healthy. And I think that kind of removes a lot of those excuses that we make for ourselves when we have those, down thoughts.
Right. Oh yeah, I totally agree. How does somebody know if they are depressed? So, I mean, depressed people feel down most of the time for at least 2 weeks. They also have at least 1 or 2 symptoms, like no longer enjoying or caring about doing the things they used to like to do. They feel sad, down, hopeless, or cranky most of the day, almost every day. And for me, with my experiences, I had both of those. With the streaming stuff, it started to just become more of a burden than an enjoyment. I stopped talking to family for weeks on end. At the time, while I was, still with my ex-fiance, I stopped giving a shit about her, and that led to our downfall. But that feeling of sad, down, and hopeless or cranky, like my mood was just poop, like every day. I just felt like there's no coming out of this. This is just the way I am, and I'm just a sack of shit. Which it's not the case.
Right. And you're not, and nobody really is when they feel that way. Usually sack of shits are in denial that they are sacks of shit. So
correct.
yeah.
Those are the ones you watch out for.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's fine. What are you talking about? So talk to me a little bit about the streaming. Was that kind of like because that was what you led off with. Was that kind of like your first sign as far as like something's wrong? I mean, what made it become a burden, or what made it feel like a burden?
Just video gaming in general. Anytime I was gaming, I was streaming, and I got to a point where I was like, I don't even want to fucking turn this computer on. Like, screw all this shit. Like, I'm just gonna sit inside and watch my Netflix shows, binge watch for 12 hours.
I was going to say, what's the alternate activity? Because I think when a lot of people have those downtimes, they're like, oh, I don't want to do this. I'm just going to do X instead. That was what you did instead was Netflix. Okay.
I binge watch the shit out of any show I was watching.
Gotcha. And then, so of course you wouldn't consider binge watching healthy then?
Depending. I mean, I'm still excited for when new seasons of I'm really big into American Horror Story, so I've been keeping up with this newer season that's on Hulu. So I mean, my grandpa always told me everything is good in moderation. So when you're doing too much of something, yeah, I see it becoming a problem.
Be right back. I'm going to tell Ashley I'm going to start smoking again in moderation. Just kidding. Just kidding. No, he brings up a very good point, because it is true. I mean, right? Like we even say an occasional glass of wine is good for the heart, right? It's
right.
Yeah. So I hear you on that. Okay, cool. So as far as, did you I don't want to get my friend Jimmy part 2 here, but did you seek any help? Did you reach out, or did you just think there's just no getting out of this?
Well, for my own experience, I kind of hit rock bottom, and not to get too heavy, but I had an attempt on my life. And I just happened to decide before I did it, I wanted to look at my phone, and I have my child as my home screen, and seeing that pulled me out of that moment to really reflect, hey, are you really sure you want to do this? And so after that, I got a hold of my mom the next day and told her I needed help. So I ended up checking myself into a hospital and got the help that I needed. And I'm on a better path. I'm by no means healed. There is no end all cure all for this. This is a long path ahead. I'm as I said, I'm out of the tunnel of darkness, but I still have a long road ahead of me.
And I don't want to sound like what's his name from The Bachelor, but thank you for sharing that. No, I mean that takes a lot of balls to sit here and talk about that and say, hey, like this is something that I was planning on doing and I was going to do it, and just kind of like bringing us into the thought process that was going through your mind during that situation. I mean, that's deep, and that is not an easy thing to do. So, I mean, I appreciate that alone. You having the balls to come on and talk about it. 'Cause again, in a place where, where we are in the world with the US and just our culture, just again, the stigma with mental health, that's not an easy thing to do. So props to you, buddy. Hey, when we come back, I want to talk to Jimmy a little bit more about the process of going through, what happens when you say, okay, I need help, and you check yourself into that hospital. What does that look like? On the other side of the break, we're going to talk about that. Stick around.
We're going to learn today.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Life Midwest podcast. On the other side of the break, it's your host, Kevin Palmer, and we got Jimmy with us today. Oh, geez. Oh, my goodness. I couldn't tell whether he threw up or ate his mic or dropped it or both. I don't know what happened there. Hey, if you're looking for ways to support us, we do have a PayPal that's set up. That does cost money to run the show, and we appreciate any small donation that you can make to us, showing that you appreciate what you're hearing. Help support it to continue. PayPal.me/The Life Midwest. If you're broke like the rest of us, you can also reach out to us through all of our social media platforms. That helps us generate some content too, at The Life Midwest at all of our major social platforms. You can also email us thoughts, questions, comments at support@thelifemidwest.com. You can also reach out to us through your favorite listening platform and leave a review. We got some 5-star reviews on iTunes. We're pretty stoked about that. Not Hall of Fame territory, but we're batting 1,000 with the 5-star ratings, unless that changed in the last half hour from when I last looked at it. So, Jimmy, it's been great having you on so far. I wanted to talk a little bit about your experience when you checked yourself in, and I think that's a side where I think there's a lot of people who may feel a certain way, and they're just kind of like staving it off. They're fighting it off. I think a lot of times when you have depression and anxiety, you have this like fear of the unknown. Like, I don't want to go through this because I don't know what it's like. Can you kind of paint that picture for us and talk about what that experience was like, or what that process was like, and maybe that could help alleviate the anxiety of somebody that's preventing them from going in and seeking help?
Oh, well, for starters, I want to thank you again for having me, and I really appreciate getting a platform to talk about this. But for starters, there's nothing I'm going to be able to tell you that's going to take the fear away of getting the help. Even me deciding to get the help was absolutely terrifying. Going to a hospital to tell people, yeah, hey, I want to kill myself. It's not a fun experience by any means. You get asked a lot of the same questions to a point where, you're just like, okay, you know what? Screw off. You guys are just going through the motion and you don't actually care, which is not true. Those people went to school for this reason. Like, they want to help you. They want to make sure that you get the help you need. They do care. But in the moment, it seems like you're just being asked the same repetitive questions, and it gets frustrating. It's very, very frustrating. But once you actually get checked in, then comes the even scarier part of shit. I am in a hospital and I'm being treated like, I'm gonna do bad things, which, who knows? You might still want to at that point. But for me it was like, well, now I feel like I'm in a jail, which it's not fun for anybody. I don't know if any of you out there think jail is fun, but let me tell you, that's not a fun feeling.
No, not even the free food.
Oh, buddy. That food is awful. I would have much rather had an MRE, but day one for me at least was kind of transitioning from a pissed off, very scared, feeling very small in the world person to, hey, we're here for a reason. Why don't we get a little more involved with these group sessions? So it's an experience that it's going to break you a little bit, in the sense of you're in a place you don't know and you're surrounded by people that you don't know. But you got to remember, these people are here for the same thing. Like they needed help. They wanted to get the help. So open up as soon as you can is kind of the key I'm trying to get at. Because I took 2 days to myself of self-reflection and not wanting to talk to anybody. But then once I did open up and started getting involved in the group sessions, then people wanted to talk to me because I no longer had the resting bitch face going. So I made a lot of good friends just in a few days after, opening up. So yeah, the best advice I can give is, if you do go get the help, be open.
That definitely helps, because I feel like the more open you are, no one can actually know what's going on inside of your brain unless you share that. And so I feel like in order for you to get the best help, best treatment, and the most help possible, it involves you being open and kind of ripping off that Band-Aid, as uncomfortable as it might be. I mean, would you agree with that?
Oh, full-heartedly. Yeah, you really have to rip that Band-Aid off. Like that's a good analogy for that, is just full send ahead, bud.
So what other kinds of things did you experience aside from like group sessions? How long were the group sessions and how often did you do those? I guess I want to know that too.
There was about 4 or 5 group sessions a day. Some of them would be more informative, of like, here's the type of help offered, after you're done here. Some of them you had once a day was a group activity, whether that was the first one I got to experience was Guess That Tune, which immediately was like, oh, I'm a music guy. And I only missed one, and it was by Gladys Knight. And I'm like, I never listened to that.
That's a good one to miss. That's a good one to miss.
So you get an activity and hear information given to you to help once you're out. And then there's also group sessions where they kind of leave an open floor for like you to kind of talk about your stuff going on. And that really helped me personally, because hearing that I was not alone in feeling certain ways, and hearing how these people coped or didn't cope, like, it added to my arsenal to battle this.
And I think a lot of people have that experience of thinking that, people always say like, oh, you're not alone. But I think again, when you have this kind of like mental health issue of like depression or just kind of like beating yourself up, you're like, yeah, they say that, but they don't mean that about me. Or like you find a way to say how your situation's different. And it's not to say that it's not different and that you're not special, things like that's not what I'm trying to say. But what I'm trying to say is that regardless as to what you're going through, you're not the only person going through it. I promise you. Like, find me an example and I promise you're not going through that. And again, it's not to invalidate your struggles or what you're going through, right? It's just you aren't going through that alone. Like, there is at least somebody else that you can talk to about that.
I mean, there's plenty of people on this planet. Odds are somebody is going through the exact same thing that you're going through.
Right. 100%, man.
Actually, in that same light, with what you're saying, like, not to tear away from your own personal traumas or the stuff you're going through, I think that's people's kind of biggest thing, is going into that they think, oh, my problems aren't as bad as this person. I shouldn't be feeling this way. And guess what? Everybody handles things differently. You should feel no shame for whatever it is you're going through, feeling the way you do. Your feelings are validated in the sense of it's your feelings.
Couldn't agree more. You may, because and I feel like I've said this before on the show, but it's been a long time since I've said it. Everyone in this world is going to have, there's going to be at least one person who has it better than you, and there's going to be at least one person who has it worse than you. And what I mean, what I'm trying to bring to the table when I say that is that, like, again, basically what Jimmy was saying, your struggles are not invalidated, because you can always sit there and say, like, oh, well, someone's got it worse. Well, of course someone's got it worse, but there's also someone else who doesn't have it as bad as you do either. And because of that, everyone has struggles, and those struggles should be acknowledged, and it's okay to have those struggles. And yes, they are still struggles.
If you are struggling with something, don't feel like you're a burden. Everybody can get through this together. If people just realize coming together on topics like this helps everyone, I feel like we advance as a society.
You're making a really good point. It doesn't fucking hurt anybody.
All right.
What's the big deal in talking about it? It doesn't hurt anybody to talk about it.
Well, with that stigma, it just, people don't understand, and the fear of the unknown kicks in, and people tend to shut down.
Yeah. Don't be afraid of the unknown. Don't be afraid of the unknown.
Dive into that shit.
I mean, you can dip your toe in first and test it, but then after that, dive in.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if it's like really cold, just brace yourself.
Yeah. You know what, folks? This episode has been real. It's been, it's been fun because it's with Jimmy, but it's been really real. And I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking about your own plight and sharing your experiences and talking about, mental health as it is, and just keeping that conversation going about mental health and kind of, pointing out those resources and what you can do. Even if you feel like you don't have anyone in your life that you can go to, there is always professional outlets, people who go into this profession because it's their passion, because they're passionate about you feeling better, even if they don't know you yet. They clearly want to know you. They want to help you. That's why they do what they do. So it can be an intimidating process, but like Jimmy said, just dive in. Just dive right in. Yeah. On that note, buddy, who do you want to shout out this week? Man, you get 2 shout out segments in a row.
I like it. I definitely want to give a huge shout out to Flower Hospital and the medical staff there. They did a great job of making sure I felt comfortable and I was taken care of. I also want to give a shout out to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That number is 1-800-273-8255. And again, if you ever need help with anything you're struggling with, or you feel like you've gotten to a point of no return, call that line. There's somebody out there that cares.
And a lot of those people volunteer for that too. Did you know that?
Oh yeah, they don't get paid for that. They just solely want to help people.
They care that much about you and what you're going through that they volunteer to do that. I think that's an amazing thing. Do not the first step is always the hardest, folks. Don't be afraid to call that number. I want to shout out anyone who's going through something right now, anyone who's feeling that way. If it's too hard to pick up the phone, if it's too hard to go to the hospital, if it's too hard to talk to your family or friends about it, I just shout out to you. Just keep going, because there is light at the end of the tunnel. I promise you, there is another way out of this aside from the one that you're thinking of. So please utilize those resources and think about that. I want to shout you guys out this week. So,
and if any of you are feeling that way, that it's too hard to pick up the phone or anything like that, listen to the song "Swim" by Jack's Mannequin. I'm actually planning on getting a tattoo. I'm gonna do "Swim," but the I is gonna be replaced with the semicolon.
Ooh, because the sentence isn't over. The story's not done. We love it.
Finished.
I love it. I love the semicolon tattoos. That's actually really awesome, dude. That is so cool. Hey, I want to shout you out too, Jimmy, because I know you've been going through it, and I'm glad you're here, man, and I'm glad we've had a couple of episodes together. So let's get a beer sometime outside of get these microphones out of our faces, and you know.
Oh, I would love to actually cheers you instead of cheersing a mic.
For sure, man. For sure. All right, kids, don't forget to call your mom. Have a good one. Remember, those resources are there. I'm going to put that phone number too in the podcast description for you. And I'm also going to put the link to Jimmy's Twitch there too. You can catch him. I don't know if he has a schedule set yet, but you can check out his Twitch and he'll have his schedule posted there and also some past streams and videos and content you can check out. That's Big Tuna, TEWNA 007. I follow him, so you should too. Until then, folks, we will talk to you guys next Saturday and every Saturday here on the Life Midwest podcast. Take care.
Bye.